Welcome back, everybody. This is Retro Replay with a retro review of Klonoa, Door to Phantomile for the PlayStation 1. To start off with the pronunciation of the name of this game, I believe most Americans probably pronounce this Klonoa. I know I have most of my life, but the actual proper Japanese pronunciation of this name is Klonoa. Klonoa Door to Phantomile is a PlayStation 1 exclusive developed by Namco and released in Japan in December of 1997 and later released in the United States in March of 1998. Although this is somewhat of a cutesy animated game, it starts off with a pretty dark tone here at the beginning. Klonoa finds this dark spirit named Gaudius on the mountain that they're searching for the magical moon pendant, and he wants to turn Phantomile into a world of nightmares. Klonoa and his ring spirit friend Huopao are going to do everything they can to stop this guy. This is a 2.5D side-scroller, and by 2.5D, what that means is the world is actually rendered in 3D, but the player still moves from left to right. And as you'll see through this footage, the world is in 3D. It does rotate and change as the paths wind and turn through the levels. It's actually a very neat art style and art direction and a unique use of 3D within a 2D game. The gameplay and platforming in this game starts off pretty straightforward. It is actually very reminiscent of the Kirby games on Nintendo. Similar to how Kirby can inhale his enemies and then spit them back out to hit other enemies, Klonoa can actually pick up his enemies in a similar fashion and then throw them. And he can throw them into the screen, out of the screen, and forward or backward to be able to hit enemies and different obstacles and switches throughout these levels. One of the key gameplay mechanics is when Klonoa actually picks up the enemies, what he can do to be able to sort of double jump is throw them down. And this is not complicated at all. All it is hitting the jump button again after you jump once, and he throws them down, which launches him up into the air even higher. And this is how a lot of the platforming and hard to reach areas are done in this game. Since this does use some similar gameplay mechanics to the Kirby games, just to give a little comparison between the two, I would say that this game actually has a lot more depth to the platforming. It does get much more difficult as you get further on into the game, much more difficult than any of the Kirby games. This is a much more challenging game than any of the Kirby games. So I would say, in general, this is probably a better style of platformer than the Kirby games. It's less of a kid's game, although it looks like a kid's game, it plays a lot more difficult than that. I'm sure I offended a lot of people with those comments, so if you take offense to that, let me know down in the comments section what you think. This game is broken up into 6 different worlds. Each world consists of 2 stages and a boss fight. So it is somewhat of a short game. It probably has a runtime of 4 to 5 hours or so, depending on how well you do at the game. It can get very complicated, cause a lot of deaths, which causes you to have to replay some of the levels if you have to continue. So the game length is a little bit dependent on how well you do at the game. I definitely did die a lot as I got later on in the game and had to continue and replay levels, so my gameplay length is probably a lot longer than somebody who has a lot of experience at this game. This is another boss fight. This is the boss at the end of World 4. There's a lot of variations in the boss fights in this game, which is quite interesting. Several of them kind of go in a circular fashion as you're running around in a circle in the 3D world and targeting the boss in the middle. But that one was kind of a 3D swinging boss fight where you're swinging back and forth and have to knock out the eyes of the boss. It's quite interesting. One negative that I did not like about this game is in the controls. If you notice in some of this footage, Klonoa can be a little slippery in his movement. His momentum will carry him forward. He kind of slides as he comes to a stop. I struggled with this in several sections of this game where you're on very small platforms, jumping from one platform to the other, and my momentum would carry me off of these little platforms. Even though I stopped hitting the direction on the buttons on the controller, he would keep sliding. And this kind of control can get very frustrating because you know what you're trying to do, but the game just makes you slide off these platforms. This was a bit of an issue for me. I kind of got used to it, but I did struggle with this throughout most of this playthrough. This world and set of stages was quite different. It has this normal kind of time frame that you're working through, and then it transitions into this ghost zone where the enemies transform and these spirit animals show up on the screen, and you can't attack them when they're in this spirit form. As just like it shows right here, that fish shows up on the screen. I can't attack him. I just have to avoid him, and the enemies transform, and you can't attack them either. So you have to avoid them and wait for them to transition back to this normal realm. But it constantly is going back and forth between the normal and this spirit realm. It's very strange, but very difficult. This is the boss fight at the end of World 5. This was very difficult. It took me quite a few tries to get through this. You get better and better at it. The more you fail, you learn more and more, and I did eventually get through this. It took me several tries, and it was very difficult. But it was a good boss fight. You know, it's good to have these challenging boss fights like this, and it was very rewarding once I was able to finish it. The platforming difficulty in this World 5 was definitely more difficult than most of the rest of the game. As we get into World 6 here, the difficulty increases dramatically. I struggled and struggled through World 6, and I honestly did not finish. I got stuck in a certain area. I probably died 15 times, had to continue the game multiple times, and which makes you have to restart the levels, and the levels in this final world are very long. So I got very far in World 6-2 and just kept dying repeatedly and had to keep repeating World 6-2, and I got so frustrated that I actually just quit the game. I do want to come back to this and finish World 6-2 and beat the final boss, but I have not completed that yet. You can see a good example of some of the more difficult platforming. You've got these small blocks, which definitely are not the smallest, and they fade away and disappear. I was trying to figure out how to get to that yellow gemstone there, and I failed a couple times until I figured out what I was supposed to do. But the platforming, like I said before, just increases in difficulty, almost to the point of frustration, but really you just have to learn the patterns and learn how these enemies are moving. But like this section right here with these small platforms, this was very difficult for me. I failed multiple times on this. There is kind of a method to the madness here, but as you're going through this and kind of panicking, trying to get through it with all these jumping enemies, it can get very frustrating and difficult. There's also a lot of platform puzzle solving in this game, especially as you get later into the game. They add these more difficult platforming elements where you have to figure out how to get to certain areas by using the enemies to jump higher, avoiding enemies, all different kinds of gameplay mechanics to try to get through these levels. This is a good example of some of these pre-rendered sprites that they use in this game. They use these really large pixelated sprites. I think they look really cool. It's very reminiscent of Super Nintendo style graphics. I thought it was really neat. Here's a good example of another gameplay mechanic. These blue orbs are switches, and they're actually timed switches, and they expire. You have to hit them within a certain time frame, get all 3 of them, which will unlock these next sections of the level. There's a specific pattern that you need to follow, or else the timer will run out. So those can be a little difficult. They were challenging to figure out. It was actually very rewarding once you do get it completed within the time frame that they need. One thing you may have noticed as I've been playing through this game is me hitting those orbs with the characters or sprites that come flying out of them. If you look in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, there's that moon pattern that is like 6 puzzle pieces. So in each level, each stage, there are 6 of these collectible orbs that release these sprites from them. I don't know what they are in terms of the actual game, but that is in every level. So to complete the levels 100%, you need to get all 6 of those. And this is the last section of the game I got to. I got extremely frustrated here. I died probably 10 to 15 times, had to continue twice, and I eventually just gave up on this section. But I do need to come back and try to finish this. But I'm going to wrap this up here. This was a great game. I did not play this as a kid. This was my first time attempting to play this game. There is a remaster coming out very soon, which is why I wanted to go through this. I was very impressed with the art style, the music. The controls can be a little difficult, but this was a very fun game. I'm glad I did play this, and I do want to eventually finish it. But again, thanks to everybody for watching, and remember, if you're liking these videos, please click that like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.